Welcome back, everybody, to this week's episode of the Taking a Breath podcast. I'm Parker, and before we kick off today's conversation, I want to make sure that you know about our community platform. It happens outside of the weekly conversation on Zoom and on GroupMe. So if you're between the ages of 16 to 24 and you're interested in being a part of a community interested in personal growth and pursuing connections and networking, which is something we're going to be talking about today, then hop on, go to flow.page/Parker Mays, click join the community, and let's get you signed up today. I'm excited because today I actually have one of my current professors from NC State joining me. She is not only one of my professors, but she's the Director of Experiential Learning for NC State Entrepreneurship. She leads the Albright Entrepreneurs Village, which I have had the honor of being a part of this semester and through this year, and also the Entrepreneurship Garage team. She supports student entrepreneurs through a vibrant learning community at NC State, and joined the entrepreneur team back in June of 2015. Prior to joining NC State, she spent more than 10 years working in higher education in areas of student programming, instruction, and business consulting. She's an alumni from NC State and holds a master's degree in instructional technology and leadership in higher education. Welcome, Huie, to the podcast today. How are you doing?
Hey, Parker, thanks so much for having me. I am really delighted to be here. And kudos to you for organizing such an awesome opportunity. So I think 2020 has been a mess for a lot of people, but it's been really exciting also to see what people have done with that time and energy and being able to focus. So kudos to you. I'm really excited to chat more today.
I appreciate it. Would love for you to share a little bit more about your background and what got you to where you are today with the audience.
Sure. Gosh. Oh, man. My career has been all over the place. So, and I think that that's true of a lot of people. So if you are sitting out there in the audience and you don't yet know what to do with your life, cool, most people don't, and I still don't know what I want to do with mine. I think, I'm from North Carolina originally. I came to NC State and I had a wonderful experience as an undergrad at NC State. And, I felt like it was just the right place for me. And so I kind of carried that off into my career, and I bounced around between a lot of different industries. I was a journalist immediately after school, and then I went to work in education, and then I moved outside of a small private culinary school out into the business world, and was able to work in the private sector and learn, I call it the real life MBA. You learn a lot of things when you have to, and that was really helpful for me. Learned a lot about sales, customer success and retention. And then, kind of bounced around in this hybrid world of both business and education for a while, and was offered a really exciting position in business consulting, and, have since done a lot of contract work with startups, with small businesses, with large organizations, in ways that I could plug in. And, I think ultimately, and I was living in San Francisco at the time, I should say, which I spent close to a decade in the Bay Area and learned a lot of lessons in a very different major market. But my husband and I were ready for a life change. And then I kind of got that wonderful opportunity that really switched things up for me, where I said, my passion is not necessarily in a high growth startup or in managing my own business exclusively. I have a real passion for education. I want to help other people reach their goals. So moving to NC State in this capacity was kind of like a dream come true for me, because it merged those two worlds of being able to do a lot of that coaching and leadership development that I really loved. And also, I can be in the classroom and I can work with a lot of special events and programs to help people accomplish their goals. So I don't know, best of all worlds. I think I got the best gig out there, and that's what brings us here today.
Incredible. And people who know me know that I really connect with that, of wanting to help other people reach their goals. That's part of why I'm doing this, not only so that I can grow and learn from people, but also so that other people around me can learn from these conversations. So I'm just even more excited to really be able to talk more about that. And so I'm interested, you really started to get into it, but what do you enjoy most about working with young people, and specifically young entrepreneurs?
Yeah, no, what I most enjoy about it is that there are no 2 days that are the same. I would not work well in a rinse and repeat world where you do the same things, you're just making the donuts. I can't do that. I need a lot of, I don't know, like intellectual stimulation or I guess just like a dynamic environment where a lot of ideas are taking root. You have the freedom to try things and see what works and what doesn't. And not only do I get to do that in my role, but I also get to directly interact with students who are going through that same process. And not just students, I'm here on location in a Raleigh founded community. And also I'm surrounded by startups who are doing that same thing day in and day out. So I do think it's kind of the perfect place. I'm really excited though, or I guess the question is what do I most enjoy? And I think it is just people having the confidence, the willingness to get outside of their comfort zone and try something new. And I think that's not an easy thing to do, especially when you have all these competing things going on. You've got school, maybe you have a job, you have a personal life, certainly a family, friends, other things that are demands on your time. And I think it's really important to also cultivate passion projects. And what I most enjoy, I think that there's a lot more willingness to take a chance, especially with young entrepreneurs, because you haven't signed up for the mortgage yet. You don't have a family depending on you yet, in most cases, not everyone, but in most cases. So I think there is really just this challenge of saying, I'm going to use this runway really effectively. While I'm in high school, I'm in college, the years after I graduate, and I'm just going to see what happens. And your barrier to entry is just a lot lower at that point. So it's really exciting to be able to kind of coach people and say, hey, have you thought about, I find that young entrepreneurs are just so incredibly open and that they also really challenge themselves.
That's so interesting. So for a lot of young entrepreneurs or just young leaders in general, I find that one thing that a lot of us struggle with is feeling like we're not good enough or not really valuing ourselves to the point that maybe, someone from your perspective might be looking in and say, hey, I see a lot of potential there, but we're not able to see that. What would your encouragement be to someone that's kind of struggling with their confidence or trying to work that out within themselves?
Yeah, that's first of all the human condition. So I think humans struggle with that uniquely, but I certainly do see what you're talking about, especially with young entrepreneurs and or just young people in general. It is really easy to look at all the things you don't know. I think it is harder for people to take stock of what they do know and to feel that confidence in having something that they're bringing to the table. Call it imposter syndrome, call it whatever you want. I struggle to think of someone who does not suffer from that. And I do think it's exacerbated when you are trying to learn a new skill or you're trying to master these new mindsets, you're trying to learn about a new industry. And, entrepreneurship is at its core about solving problems. And what if you don't have the right solution? That's the biggest stopper that I hear over and over again. It's like, well, what if this is not the right solution? Or people will wait for, I call it like that bolt of lightning in the middle of the night of this like perfect idea. And I just don't think that exists. I don't think that crystallizes. I think it's a series of a million tiny steps to get there and conversations and digging and trying new things and trying. So I think ultimately what can people do about that is to really take stock of their strengths and weaknesses and play to your strengths, continue to develop those strengths. I think there are a lot of also personality identifiers and, strengths quest and other things that you can take to help identify those things for you as well. Now, my criticism is when people only focus on their strengths, right? Because also, if you have a weakness, a flat side, a gap, whatever you want to call it, that's also something to work on, right? So maybe don't take on a full-time role that specifically focuses on things you're not great at. Cool, that sounds like torture to me. But it's also an opportunity to highlight, like, this is an opportunity for me to learn something in this area. If you feel really insecure about the business planning part of this, great. There are so many, access is unlocked like never before to learn new things, to get access to new people and coaching and all that. So I think really it comes down to self-awareness and getting a firm grasp on what you're good at, what you're not great at, what do you know, what do you not know, and just being very strategic and like, where are the gaps that you need to fill and where would you go out and find a partner that can help fill those gaps? I think that's another great way to identify like, and here's what I bring to the table.
That's great. I think that to your point about it, it is something that everyone struggles with. I think something that as you're sharing and I'm thinking through it with the points that you're bringing up, I'm realizing that, wow, maybe part of the reason that is coming out in these types of young people that I'm around is because they're the ones who are getting out of their comfort zone, as opposed to just being, comfortable where they are. Okay, well, if I'm comfortable where I am, then I'm not going to have that. I don't feel any sense of lack of confidence. But as soon as I start taking risks, like you mentioned, as soon as I start getting out of my comfort zone, then suddenly I'm like, I do struggle with imposter syndrome or those types of things. So actually, I think you bring up a great point. Everyone struggles with it, but especially when people are taking those big steps, it's like, oh, it's going to come out. So that's super interesting. The next thing that I wanted to mention, you mentioned the resources that are around us. So right now we have an incredible amount of access to resources, especially I know something that we talk about a lot in class is the value of your network. And so I want to talk a little bit about that because it's something that even just in the last few months, as I've been in class, I've been learning a lot about. To you, what is, the biggest value of a great network? And then also as students, what are the ways that we can continue to intentionally make new connections?
Yeah, I think the value of a network cannot be overstated. It literally cannot. You think about it, your network's like your team. They're your home team. And very rarely do you take the field by yourself. Certainly there are some games. I played tennis. Tennis might be an example of that. But almost always you're surrounded by great people. And those are supporters, coaches, all that. Your network is so important in developing you as a professional, as a person, academically, in your career path, whatever that might be. And their friends, their coaches, they have something to offer. Maybe they're just a sounding board. And you can't do it alone. Very few people have built a really impressive career purely based on what they think or what they read in a textbook, right? Almost always it comes from that real life experience and an exchange of ideas. So I think, the value is certainly there. I think the entry point is something that I watch people struggle with is like, okay, I recognize that I should build a network, but I'm not quite sure how to get started in that. Or, being new to wonderful platforms like LinkedIn, I know that there are feelings about like, oh, is LinkedIn the place for me? LinkedIn serves a really wonderful purpose for helping build your professional network, right? That's its singular focus. And there are other integrations and things like that. But, especially if you don't plan to live in one place and work in one company the rest of your life, as you move around, very rarely are you going to talk to those same people every day or email them every day. But, just like with most social media, it's a way that you can still feel connected in one another's lives. And you can see, celebrate when somebody gets a promotion or if they've taken on a new job and moved elsewhere, like you're still in the loop. It still builds on that connection and people are able to support you and you're able to support them. So I think LinkedIn really should be that entry point. And LinkedIn is not the same as you're going to use TikTok or other things. And you shouldn't use it that way, right? You should be very intentional that this is about your professional network and ultimately what you want the world to know about you. I also think people should be really brave when establishing their network. People love to serve as mentors. And that is such a gratifying experience. I have loved being a mentor to others. I have loved working with mentors of mine. And I think people are way more willing than you might give them credit for. So what I would also say, and we may talk more about mentorship. So I think that maybe there's so many points we need to unpack there. But I think, find wonderful mentors and, really help them get something out of the experience too. Come prepared, ask for questions, set up times to meet in ways that you can interact organically. I just think you always need to be intentional about like, okay, what is missing from your network based on where you see yourself going? And so then you can ask for introductions to go find those people, or you can scout them out yourself and send them a quick note and say, hey, I'm really interested in your background. I would always play the student card too. I say this in class a lot, Parker, you're probably tired of hearing me say this, but you have such a unique opportunity to say, hey, I'm a student at NC State and I'd like to do X. And as soon as people learn that you're a student, they're so willing to help versus thinking that you're, like a salesperson trying to sell them on something down the road. I think really use that to your benefit. Use that NCSU email account and have that included in your LinkedIn profile so that people understand like, oh, great, I'd love to mentor a student. I want to help them solve whatever problem they're trying to solve. So I think it's just one of the most important amplifiers of your career, especially early on, but I would argue at any stage. and go interview any CEO of any company that has really impressed you or you find aspirational. And always they will point to having a wonderful network and wonderful mentors along the way.
Dang. So yes, that was a lot. There's a lot there that I want to unpack because all very good points. And the first thing that I want to highlight, because I know people are listening to this and caught this, that Haley is probably the first out of anyone I've ever talked to over the age of like 24 that has mentioned TikTok and actually knows what it is. The reason I want to highlight that is because you are someone who I've noticed is very like observant of behavior, not only for businesses, not only for consumers, but I am interested to know for businesses right now, and especially young entrepreneurs who kind of know the social media and know technology, what are platforms that you see as good investments to right now, start putting out content on these platforms? What are the main things that you're seeing from your perspective?
Yeah, and full disclosure, I am no marketing whiz. I only know what I observe in the world and what I've seen to be true. But thank you, Parker. That's really kind. I think I'm just a student of culture and like what's going on in the world around us. So always learning new things. And what I say today will not be true probably 1 year from now. So I think that's the other really interesting thing is, you have to stay curious. And just because you've learned something today doesn't mean that you have this mastered. But I think, so as we think about ways that we share information about ourselves, I still think it's totally practical to have a personal website. Something that, if somebody were to Google you and want to learn more about you, your personal brand, that is, that's a one-way communication channel to be able to share with the world what you want. In terms of social media and or other platforms that exchange information, again, LinkedIn, I just want to put a pin in that again as being so critically important. And there's so many helpful people and resources to help you build a profile and a presence that you're really proud of. But I think that's a non-negotiable, especially if you're going to be applying for jobs, especially if you're, even when I take students on trips to other cities, if I decide, okay, we're going to travel to Chicago next year, the first thing I would do is go to LinkedIn and find local connections, people in the alumni network. I'm going to find really impressive people purely for using that. I think you really can't beat Instagram for storytelling. I think that is so critically important because what you're doing there is you're able to capture snippets of narrative. You're able to incorporate video, visual content at large, and Instagram's been really wonderful, both prior to being acquired by Facebook. So when they started as a disruptor in that space because they were really the only ones doing it well. And then certainly after acquisition, because then they're kind of flushed with more cash, bodies, and resources in general, they really continued that presence of who people are. So we've seen the rise of influencers, right? And I think directly that can tie back to, Instagram, certainly TikTok, because, suddenly you have 10 million views of a very short video and everybody's talking about it. And, you go into a boardroom or a water cooler or, just go grab tacos today and you're going to hear people talking about the same video. That means that you have really created some content we're talking about. Another thing that I'll often have people kind of approach me and say, well, how do I become recognized as like an expert in the field or as somebody that is seen as a valuable resource? And I also think Twitter is really helpful in that way. And I will say that I got it wrong because when Twitter first came online, I was very skeptical and thinking, well, I don't really care what you had for lunch today. And I don't really care what that random thought is that you're just pushing out into the world. And I was totally wrong. There's so much great content out there. And Twitter has made me even more of a reader. And I'm a voracious reader. My husband will tell you, I'll sometimes read multiple books per week. But Twitter really helps push out content that I otherwise might not connect with, especially with news articles and things like that, which please always verify your sources, election, PSA, and also, but really be open. And that's helped me connect with people who I would recognize as public figures that I might otherwise not recognize. And, if you know what you're talking about and you develop a following and you push out great content into the world, which, by the way, Parker, is exactly what I think you're doing, I think that is so valuable. So I think a lot of people will stay away from something because it's for people older than themselves or younger than themselves or whatever it is other than themselves. And I say be open, but be intentional about that, because not everything is a fit for you. Figure out what that personal brand that you're trying to communicate is, and then certainly choose a platform or platforms in almost all cases that are going to help align that to whatever that like personal mission is.
Spot on. I think for any content creators listening right now, whether it's business or personal brand content creators, rewind the last 3 minutes, go back through and listen. That's for people interested in content creation. That's probably the most valuable 3 minutes out of the entire 25, 26 episodes I've done. But to your point right there at the end, people like what they know, right? It's the same reason people didn't want to shift from Facebook to Instagram to TikTok, right? And of course, there's the awareness of, okay, where does my brand really make sense, But to some level, we see content creators that, okay, you made business content that's doing really well on TikTok or made personal, whatever it is. I was 2 weeks ago, I did an interview with a guy who, right when Instagram Reels started, so they released like a TikTok style platform, right? And he really capitalized on it. He, over the past 4 weeks, has gotten 25,000 new followers on his platform. Like it's about seeing the thing. And you mentioned Twitter, right? It's about seeing the potential in it and then capitalizing on it. And we got to talk in detail about that. But this, where it's actually a spread, like where the platforms are, where the attention is, and especially I think the platforms that you highlighted are especially where our target audience is 18 to 24. All of these platforms are where they either are or should be. And so I appreciate that advice, because those are the things that I'm trying to not only think about and continue developing, but as I'm, you mentioned putting out content with the podcast, I'm trying to feel out, all right, like where are people seeing the attention go?
You just said something really important too that I want to piggyback on, because you need to figure out where people are going, where the world is going. I think that's also critically important, as it's not just about you and what you think. So we've seen a lot change over the past decade with that, really. And I'm gonna call out political campaigns that used to really rely on scripted speeches and like a press room environment. Suddenly social media won the game. And love or hate a particular candidate, that's a winning strategy, because social media, you're in control. That's your voice. You're choosing what to push out in the world. It's less filtered. You're not going through 3 people vetting you. And I think, companies and brands have really embraced that message as well. And certainly we're doing it before it was as popular in the political sphere. But, suddenly, using ads are really helpful to find your specific user. And you want to be where your user is. And, also, let me tell you, first of all, I spend a lot of money on brands that find me through different platforms, especially Instagram. And I'm sure my husband would delete my account if he could. But that's really critical, because there is an exchange of information and you're able to interact in these really fluid ways. I'll go back to campaigns because we're in election season and it's just on the mind in the next couple of days. But rather than waiting for a debate, what if you could debate 24/7? Right? And that's essentially what we see playing out. And same with brands. If you're trying to, vie for market share against a direct competitor, you need the most compelling content. And, it's really more a creative strategy game than purely waiting for who has the biggest media buy, or, who has $1 million to spend on X campaign. You don't necessarily need that anymore. You could pick up, to your point, 25,000 followers over the course of hours, days, whatever that benchmark looks like for you, if you just introduce really fresh content that speaks to your specific customer.
The biggest things that I tell people when they're asking about starting to, build personal brand, it's about that exactly. It's what are the core thing, like what do you want to communicate to people, right? Because if you're just saying, hey, this is me just throwing whatever, okay, anyone can do that, right? But it's that intentionality around, all right, what am I communicating? What is it about me? And then also, putting out the content. Yeah, where are people looking at? And I will admit, like when TikTok first came out, for example, I was so like, oh, this is going to be gone like tomorrow, whatever. Like I was hating on it. And then now, some listeners may have seen this, may not have. I use the example of there was this account named Dogface, and this guy was longboarding down a street holding some juice, like some cranberry juice, and Ocean Spray is the brand. And now like Ocean Spray is like making like best sales they've done in a while, just because this one dude got 50 million views on a TikTok. Right. And it wasn't sponsored. It wasn't ad anything like that. He's just chilling, And so I think even brands where you're just like, oh my gosh, like they're going to benefit from that. So I think there's so much, you mentioned influencer culture. It's like, yeah, like these are the people that can put your product in front of your target audience. So I think we'll continue to see, especially for young entrepreneurs, leaning into that, like, oh, can I get an influencer, like sending free product? That's something I see a lot. It's like, hey, I'm a young entrepreneur. It's going to cost me $20 to send this person. And if they post on their story with a picture of it, then suddenly, boom, I'm best sales. So I think there's just, it's about constantly changing and adapting. And you mentioned it, maybe none of these platforms 1 year from now exist. Like, and that's okay. It's simply about knowing how to continue to adapt and change with the things that are going on. I love it. So obviously, as Haley now knows, and some people in the audience know, social media marketing, consumer behavior is a big passion of mine. And when she started saying that, I was like, whoa, okay, we got to dig into it. So that was a little bit of a tangent that I really am passionate about. And I think for young people, we're going to continue to see the importance of it. I wanted to circle back though, because you touched on mentors, and I think that it's something that's really important as part of your network. I kind of talk about networking in terms of two parts. One, your peer networking, your peer mentors, and then also your vertical mentors, the people who are ahead of you, who can teach you and kind of bring you. So kind of looking at both parts of that. And if you want to jump in there before, and then I'll ask the question as well.
Parker, I would just highlight, underscore, retweet, exclamation mark, something that you just said, and that is that you can't just rely on vertical mentors, that peer mentors can also be such game changers. And, I think it's as much a support group as anything else, but, as you're going through the same challenges, just being able to spitball with people who are going through the same things as you, sometimes you just see things with a slightly different lens. And I think that also should be celebrated as much as, finding this person who's, a high growth C-suite executive. Yes, they have a lot to teach you, but also probably so does your roommate. So being very open to experience coming from all angles. So that's what I wanted to say before we jump into the professional mentor topic.
I love that. And it's great because when I say something like that, I know people are like, oh, okay, that makes sense. But when I get that affirmation of like, hey, this is someone who is further along that's saying that your peer mentors are important, I think there's a lot of value in that. So I definitely appreciate that. For people, especially students that are interested in, I say like kind of leveling up your mentors. And I don't mean that in terms of like, oh, well, all my mentors are terrible. But I'm talking about like, okay, how can I start to reach out further, build my network of mentors versus just, so I have the professors that were put in my life, or, parents, friends, or, however that starts to build. How do I then, what are the steps that I can take to be intentional about reaching further out?
Okay, gosh, that's a really good question. And the answer is probably not the same for any two people, because like what you uniquely want to learn or know is probably different than every single person who listens to this. So 100%. This is totally a choose your own adventure. However, I think there are some best practices. So yeah, it's interesting. You called out professors. Some got to take their class, but some you choose, right? Sometimes they are the people that you choose to have in your life. The same can be true, by the way, for who you choose as your friends or your roommates or whoever you surround yourself with, and student activities and teams that you're a part of and things like that. But I think also getting outside of that and saying, okay, I know the people that I know. Now I want to build out this more robust mentor network. And how do I do that? There's always the opportunity to reach out with cold calls and emails, but I just think that's so incredibly uncomfortable for people that's, oh no, my light just turned off in my office. That's usually not when people start, hang on, Parker, I'm gonna jet over here and turn my light on really quick.
No worries. We'll edit that. We'll edit that out.
We're saving the environment, but also my light turns off in almost every meeting that I'm a part of. So I think the other really important thing with mentors is that there are two philosophies that are pretty dominant and a lot of flavors in between. There is the forced coupling mentality, which sounds awful. It kind of sounds like an arranged marriage, but it kind of is, because you engage in a process or in a relationship where somebody says, I'm going to match you with someone, or I'm going to make this direct introduction. And maybe you wouldn't necessarily find that same person for yourself, and they might not choose you. But there can be a lot of value created out of those relationships, because sometimes, when you have almost like that mentor mentee matchmaker, they're able to identify, or there's some assessment that can be done on the front end to say, okay, cool, Parker, I know you want to learn about these things in this area. I happen to know someone wonderful in my network. Let's go ahead and match that up. That can be done through simple introductions organically, or that can be part of a program. Now, I have had the wonderful fortune to partner NC State Entrepreneurship and our team with the eClinic, which operates out of Poole College of Management. And we've kind of joined forces on a mentorship program that does a lot of really great things for students at NC State in particular. And I am a part of mentorship programs for other Triangle schools that will remain nameless. But this one is, of course, near and dear to my heart, because I think it's just the best people around the table consistently, month after month. And this is more of a freewheeling program that lets people meet people that they should have and know in their network. And I think it is a crime that more people don't take advantage of this. It is such a high value opportunity to be in the same room with the amazing mentors that we have, who show up, who get so much out of this experience, who very rarely would you have a chance to interact with them on your own. And you wouldn't maybe even know that they exist, but these are business leaders, these are entrepreneurs, investors, founders, funders, high growth executives, people who sat in your exact chair and just want to be able to give back. And what do they want out of it? They want a strong relationship. They want to be able to validate some of their life experiences, sharing them with other people. It's really, intrinsically just about helping people. And I think, how do you level up the mentors in your lives? Open yourself up to those opportunities, right? Are you going out and doing the hard work to create opportunities for yourself? So I think if there is an opportunity, say yes, and then figure out where it fits in your life, right? And I'm not saying to overcommit and say yes to all the things, or you can't do a good job with anything. But what I am saying is make this space in your life for things like that. Like, there's always going to be bingeable content on Netflix or whatever the next thing is. There are always going to be other things to do with your time. And, time is such a currency when you're young. It costs you nothing to take advantage of these programs, but it can make such a difference in where you go, especially your first, let's say, 10 years after college. I think it's really important to use your resources. And what that does not mean is that you already have to have the answers or know the people. It means that you're willing to put yourself in a position where people can kind of amplify that outreach. So I think it's so critically important. And there's value that can come out of the forced coupling scenario. There's value that can come out of this very organic mix and match program where you're meeting different people every single month. And I also get that it's uncomfortable, especially if you are like, oh gosh, it makes me cringe so badly to walk into a room full of people that I don't know, or in this case, sign on to a Zoom call full of people while we're still navigating this pandemic. But I think whatever it is, say yes. Go to conferences. Go to conferences as a student, to professional conferences. That really will help you learn more, make connections, and that interplays really nicely with managing social media and with managing your own brand, because suddenly you're building a group of people who believe in you and want you to succeed. And you're doing the hard work to make it happen too.
Absolutely love it. I think that's incredible. I love the idea of being an active versus passive participant just in your life in general. And I think this is a perfect example of it. If you are sitting around, especially right now, right, where we don't have as much open access, like if we're just sitting around saying, well, I can't wait for mentors to come to me, like, no, I think there is so much value in actively seeking out those, whether it's a program that can help you get connected, or whether it's just you in any of these ways, LinkedIn, email, through your student network, whatever that looks like. There's so much value in it. So I appreciate that. For everyone listening, I know we've gone a little bit longer than usual, but as you can tell, I was incredibly passionate about the things that we were talking about. So I don't apologize for that at all. I hope you, as listeners, got more value out of it as well. And to Haley's point about leveling up your network, your mentors, I want to circle back to that point that I made right at the very beginning, which is through Taking a Breath right now, we're really working on putting together a community where you, as a listener of the podcast and an engager of the content, can join a network of young people that are interested in growth. So if right now you're like, hey, I have no idea how I would make that happen, guess what? flow.page/Parker Mays, sign up for the community and we'll make it happen. All right. But I wanted to give that plug because I think it's incredibly relevant to exactly what we're talking about. And we even will bring in people like Haley, other guests, to come and share with you live, that chance to really meet and interact with. Haley might be a part of it. I don't know. We'll see. We'll find out. But yeah, so I really appreciate you all listening. I thank you, Haley, for all the thoughts and everything you shared today.
Oh yeah, of course. Parker, your message I think is so positive, and I think it's also infectious. And it is like, hey, you're in the driver's seat. So take this time, use this time and develop yourself. And I think you're doing such impressive things. I really hope that people take you up on that opportunity, because very rarely will people do the work for you of creating this community and opening the door for you. So I encourage everybody, you're lucky to have Parker in your life. And if you just stumbled across this today, cool. Keep coming back, because I know there are a lot of other great things in store, but I look forward to following along.
Thank you so much, Harry. That means a lot. And I appreciate everybody listening, and we will see you again next week.